Hi, this is Rob Hadley for Vancouver Hypnotherapy and the Technical Hypnotherapy Association, and what I'm going to talk about today is the effect of direct action and indirect action of pharmacy and also other narcotics or drugs and toxins in the body. Now, this is an area which we see a lot in our clinic, and we do a great deal of work within our clinic, and the main thrust of what we're saying today is how those narcotics affect the body. So, for example, if you were to go out and start using pot, your initial action is one of feeling very, very mellow and you feel very relaxed, whatever else. And in BC we have a lot of pot, obviously, here in BC and Canada. Now, later, we're looking at this would be about a 4-hour period in something like pot. Later you begin to sort of settle down a bit, and then you go into a secondary action, or what we call indirect action. And the indirect action is to feel a little more nervous, a little more anxious, and get a little bit worked out, and some people talk about the munchies and all this kind of stuff. And then again, about 4 hours, and then you're kind of out of it. Then you're through the situation. So, we call this direct and indirect actions. Now, Hahnemann, who was the doctor who really formalized the idea of homeopathy, first described this in the, I think, mid-1800s, so about 1840, 1850, somewhere there. And he was talking about the direct action and the indirect action of drugs. And he really described it very, very well in some of his writing. And a lot of people who are involved in homeopathy are very familiar with this. But what we see in our practice is that this applies not just to something like pot. This applies to sleeping pills. It can apply to any number of different types of pharmacy. So let's say you use a sleeping pill to get to sleep. Fine. Well, sometime in the middle of the night, let's say you sleep through, but you wake up in the morning not really feeling as though you've slept that well. And a lot of it suggests that there's an indirect action where the body's actually trying to open itself or reawaken itself. Okay, now just bear with me because we're going to go a bit further with this. Okay, so this is when you first use pot or sleeping pills or some other types of drugs. If you've been using drugs for, say, 5 years, say pot, for 5 years, and in BC again, I say, we've got a fair amount of that going on. Then you start to see something different. The initial action, the direct action, is lower. The indirect action is greater. So you start to see more of these cravings, more of these other behaviors and other factors of the addiction start to take hold. Now, there are factors in this, such as the body trying to get rid of toxins, that start to become pretty negative. So in someone who's a long-term pot user, we will see night sweats, the body really trying to push that out. We'll see some rashes, a redness in the face, the respiratory system looking red. You can actually see it around the face sometimes. And other issues. Often we see back pain, lower back pain. And that seems to be to do with the liver and the kidneys, just trying to express some sort of pain. Now, of course, there's no nerve endings in those organs. But we see it. Everybody who's been long-term using pot or other types of narcotics, we often see this lower back pain. And that's quite a coincidence, really. Okay, so this is at 5 years or so. And BC again, we have this long history of pot being pretty available, and it's not really that much of a problem to get it. So you look at a 20-year user, he's getting virtually no lift. But boy, is he getting the indirect action. The 20-year user is really anxious. The 20-year user has lousy sleep. He has terrible night sweats. His body is just trying to shed all these toxins, even to the point that with a pot user of 20 years, if they're smoking particularly, we'll see them coughing and black flecks, resin, in their sputum, in their handkerchief. So this indirect action increases as the addiction goes on. And this applies across many different types of addiction. But going back to the sleeping pill analogy, you can have the person who's been taking sleeping pills over a longer period, and I'm not talking about 20 years, I'm talking about 4 or 5 months. Very little effect, very little direct action of that pharmacy, but massive indirect action. The sleeping pill can actually be keeping them awake. Now, working in hypnotherapy, our job is not just to look at their general health. It's to look way beyond that. What's really going on for these people at many, many levels. And there's often a really unhealthy belief that pharmacy is always going to solve a problem. But when you start looking at things like this, you can see it really does contribute to the problem. So some of those belief systems really have to be addressed within the hypnotherapy side, within the therapy part of the sessions. So this is a little bit of a backstory on addiction and pharmacy and how it impacts the body. You might even want to comment in the little section down below here about your experience of working with people who have long-term pharmacy use and long-term use of narcotics. There is an interesting exception, and that is alcohol. Sometimes we see a slightly different thing going on with alcohol. The effect over a long period of time, it can stay more or less constant. I don't know why, but alcohol use seems to break this pattern. So this is by no means a rule, but as a guideline, when you're seeing very, very long-term use of pharmacy or narcotics, generally the action becomes less and less, and the indirect action becomes more and more. My name is Rob Hadley. Please check out the Technical Hypnotherapy website, and you can also see there where there are seminars coming up and online training which you can get through the Technical Hypnotherapy Association at technicalhypnotherapy.com.